So Separate Ways is finally here. Ever since Resident Evil 4 Remake's launch back in March, we've been waiting for confirmation of the rumoured expansion. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and finally, a whole 6 months later at a PlayStation State of Play, it appeared, confirming we would only have to wait one more week until it was in our hands. Now, I recently reviewed the original Separate Ways only a few weeks back, and I came out of the experience enjoying it for what it was, but hoped the remake could incorporate a number of changes that would elevate the experience, taking what was a base product and making it essential for the wider Resident Evil 4 Remake experience. Taking me just over 6 hours to complete, I am glad to say that Separate Ways doesn't just meet my expectations, it completely eclipses them, easily becoming the best piece of Resident Evil DLC, and the best DLC of all.
Okay, everybody simple down now!
Alright, one that stands tall with the greats. Throughout this review, I'm going to explain what Capcom have done to raise the bar from the original, and how by listening to the fans, they have made this add-on worthy of your time. Now, as usual, I'm going to split this review into plot, gameplay, and presentation, and as I go through, I will cover off spoilers, but don't worry, I'll give you a heads up on the major ones so you can avoid them. Now let's dive in. Separate Ways plot, in broad strokes, is the same as the original. We follow Ada Wong learning what she got up to during Leon's quest to save Ashley Graham from the hands of Los Illuminados. But Remake hasn't followed this beat for beat. It spends its time wisely on characters that we as fans adore. We get extra time with the main man, Luis Serra. The DLC opens with Ada springing him from custody and continues to involve him through 3/4 of the DLC as Ada inches closer and closer to procuring the Amber, completing her mission. We get to see exactly what Luis had to go through to get the medicine, and how intrinsic Ada was to Leon's ultimate success. Now, we knew Ada had saved Leon's ass a few times throughout the base game, but playing through this DLC, you really see just how much Ada carries this mission, and how much she cares for Leon, even if she puts on a front acting like it's all for her sake. Now, Ada's always been a grey character, but this DLC gives us more opportunities than ever before to learn about her, to see her struggle with the ramifications of giving the Amber over, to know that if she followed her orders to the T, it would result in the death of Leon, Ashley, and billions of people. It shows that she has a conscience. She may be in it for the money, but she's ultimately a good person. Spending more time with Ada was an absolute joy, and it really helped open my eyes on a character that doesn't get as much screen time as she deserves. Ada's always been a fan favourite, the femme fatale of the RE series, but Separate Ways doesn't just leave it at that. It presents a multifaceted view of Ada, one which helps elevate the character in ways we've never seen before. Now, when it comes to fan favourites, the one above all for me is Albert Wesker. In the original, his appearance was stuck behind a screen as he issued his orders and requested updates on Ada's progress. Here, in Remake, they've elevated this, giving the big bad his first appearance in the Remake series. He's not just on the phone. My guy actually turns up to enact his own plans, and for the limited time we get with him, he makes a killer impression. The performance by Craig Bertanowski somehow matches up to, and in parts, supersedes DC Douglas's legendary run as Wesker, adding an intimidation factor, which raises the threat level without him even doing anything. It's marvellous. For the final character I'm going to mention here, I'll move it into spoiler territory, so skip ahead if you don't want to know. The Black Road Verdugo, Passanta, finally makes his grand entrance. In the original RE4, Passanta fused with Salazar to become the Queen Plaga, but, as we know in 4 Remake, this didn't happen. So me, and to be honest the vast majority of the internet, thought good old Black Road would show up here in the DLC, but no one could have predicted the sheer impact she has on Ada's story. Right from her first appearance, Pisanta infects Ada with the Plaga. Now she has the ability to inflict hallucinations, helping her overcome her prey in combat. This infection is the main difference between the original and the remake. It gives Ada reason to aid Luis in creating the suppressant, and it allows Capcom to really go above and beyond when it comes to differentiating Pisanta from the Red Cloak Verdugo of the base game. For 3/4 of the game, she becomes the main adversary, hunting Ada down with ferocious intent. You're never too far away from her finding you, and whenever she does, the boss fights that accompany are intense, as you try to identify which target is the real one, and which are false copies brought about by your increasing infection. Remake takes this character that could have just been a copy and paste boss from base RE4, and instead molds it into a driving force for the narrative. And it doesn't just do this through cutscenes and boss fights. Separate Ways includes even more files on how the creature came to be, which complement the documents we found with Leon, giving us loreheads even more to sink our teeth into. Capcom went above and beyond with Pisanta. Now, as much as myself and the internet called her inclusion here, no one could have predicted just how much impact she would have on the overall plot, pacing, and challenge of the game.
Clever girl.
Now, there's one area of the plot and the game in general that just doesn't feel like it's been given the same attention, and frankly, I'm not sure why it's even here. Martinico. This abomination is talked about in 2 or so files before it's shown, and after 2 very short encounters where you have to run, it's over. Now, I don't know why they bothered to include this thing. Sure, it was cool seeing a new enemy which looked like a mix of a hunter gamma and king shark, but its inclusion was over so quickly with very little build-up, character, or impact. To me, this whole segment felt like a on-the-nose bit of fan service, like the same way you watch Welcome to Raccoon City and they throw in a cheesy one-liner. You know, the kind that makes you shake your head tutting as you facepalm.
Hey!
You snooze, you lose.
What?
Still a sandwich now.
Fuck off.
I think Capcom felt they had to bring back the lasers and couldn't think of a way to make it fit within the wider RE4 they had envisioned here, so they came up with this MacGuffin. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved seeing the laser room return, and the scene itself is super cool visually, but Martinico didn't get the chance to become anything more than a bum note in Separate Ways' otherwise stellar plot. Now, I can already hear the comment section coming at me with, "Oh Davey, how could you not see they had to include this to set up RE5, as Krause's body had a dominant strain which only came about as a result of the doctor's experiments in Martinico." Yeah, I know that's there, and it's awesome that we finally got to see Wesker retrieving Krause's body, rather than just reading about it in RE5, but that doesn't change the fact that this entire section was over in no time at all, and we couldn't even do anything to combat the thing. We just had to run through 2 scripted corridors while pressing a couple of prompts. They could have just skipped this whole thing and just had extra files on Krauser and why he got a cool ass sword arm. I don't know, maybe I'm being ungrateful and I'm the only one that thinks this, but I can't help but feel this whole encounter was needlessly rushed and poorly executed. Overall, Resident Evil 4 Separate Ways' plot expands on what was here in the original, providing more lore, deeper characters, and a self-contained narrative which perfectly complements Leon's adventure in the base game. It improves on what came before from the PS2 port onwards, and sets up the inevitable RE5 remake with a perfect reintroduction to the big bad of the RE series. Well done, Capcom, you nailed it. Being DLC for Resident Evil 4 Remake means the team at Capcom didn't need to do an awful lot to make the game feel incredible. When I reviewed the base game on its release, I couldn't stop going on about just how good it was, how the knife parries were satisfying, how enemies took a beating to go down, creating fear in numbers, how the feast and famine of resources was utilised so perfectly to create a survival horror experience in what is, traditionally, the start of the action phase in the Resident Evil series. All of that is here in separate ways, and in fact, this is the first time in my memory that I've ever run out of resources completely, having nothing but a knife to try and finish off a boss before my inevitable death, restarting the fight to make sure each shot counts. It was incredibly tense and gratifying when you finally get that well-earned W. Now, when I reviewed the OG Separate Ways, I had hoped for a number of improvements to the gameplay, namely the grapple gun incorporated into the combat, the boss fights to be reworked, and a reintroduction of one boss in particular. Now, I'm glad to say that all of my hopes and dreams came true here. The grapple gun. My god, it's so great to use. If you get a stun and you're close, you can do a normal melee, and if they are outside of your immediate vicinity, you can whip up, laying them out with a spinning kick. It opens up the battlefield whereby you don't have to shoot the guy closest to you. You can choose to target a distant threat, getting the stun, and using the grapple to whip through the crowd to reposition. And that's not all. If you're happy sacrificing one of your charms, you can trade 5 spinels for the ability to rip shields off the arms of enemies.
Gotcha, bitch!
It's incredibly stylish and offers a deeper level of tactical play. A total win-win. And when it comes to moving through the environment, be that exploring or escaping threats, it's so seamless to use, it feels like as if the map has always been designed in a way to incorporate it. The grapple gun has always been a major component of Ada's character. By building it into the base gameplay at every level, it not only helps the campaign feel unique, it adds speed to the experience, whereby you don't have to sprint at an enemy hoping you get there before the stun wears off. Now, you just hit a button and Batman that bitch. Now, before I go into spoilers on the bosses, let's talk about what stayed the same. Weapon-wise, Ada's explosive crossbow returns, giving more options for crowd control rather than having to wait for a grenade to explode. And she gets a unique shotgun, which to my knowledge is identical to the base game's W870 in how it performs, except now it's sawed off to reduce it down to a 6x2 rather than 8x2, which saves inventory space, and that's always nice. These weapons, just like the base game, have the ability to be upgraded to unlock additional effects, like 2x explosive power or more damage, and it's nice to see the same care of the weapon upgrading be brought into Separate Ways, when in the original, it wasn't possible to do this. It provides choice for the player, giving reason to go out and procure treasures, complete side objectives, ensuring the in-game economy works just as well as the base game. Just like the original Separate Ways, Ada has less health than Leon, and no access to a bulletproof vest, which means even basic enemies can cause a real threat for her if you mess up on a parry, or are stupid enough to stand near dynamite. The trade-off is speed, and with the maneuverability given by the grapple gun, it's a trade-off that further helps it feel unique from the base game. Alright, bosses time. I move it into spoilers for this, so feel free to skip ahead to the timestamp shown. When it comes to bosses, there's a few requests and predictions I'd hoped to see here, and literally all of them came true. First up, U3 is back, baby! I had hoped that Black Cloak would appear in this DLC, and as I covered in the plot section, she is the main antagonist for the majority of the game. As Ada's infection grows with ferocity, she realizes that the only way to be free is to defeat Pasanta once and for all. Now, unlike the original RE4, you don't have a maze to work through before dropping down to fight, and it is a damn shame they didn't incorporate this into the game, but to be honest, with the quality of the fight here, utilizing parries, evades and mob management, I love how they've re-envisioned this boss, and I'll be surprised if the community turns against this inclusion. It worked so well for me, and brought back enough of the base U3's moveset, while providing a fresh new spin to keep any player on their toes. Speaking of fresh spins, I had hoped that Sadler and the El Gigante would be fully reworked, and to my delight, they were. The El Gigante fight is a real standout, You have to use your grapple gun to get to an elevated position to be able to unleash a world of hurt onto the exposed plaga. This is balanced with risk, as the building you're standing on will be pummeled by the creature, and if it collapses while you're on it, you can expect to take a shit ton of damage. It forces you to constantly be on the move, zipping from each vantage point as you try to line up every shot, ensuring you make them count. The verticality throughout this fight is incredible, helping it feel truly unique from the fights with Leon. And when you get the option for a grapple gun melee, Ada goes all Attack on Titan on his ass, zipping in like she's got ODM gear to unleash the hurt. Super goddamn stylish. In the original Separate Ways, the Saddler fight sucked ass. It was him walking towards you slowly while you just hit a constant string of button prompts to avoid his attacks, until you did enough damage.
Do it! Do it! Come on, kill me! I'm here! Come on! Do it now! Kill me!
Here, they've given him a whole host of moves which you either parry, reposition, or hit circle to avoid. Learning these attacks and how best to combat them is exactly what I look for in a boss fight. The altar area offered more space compared to that walkway, giving Saddler a chance to shine, and even though I would have ideally liked more verticality to the fight, he had enough variance in his moveset to elevate the fight over its original outing. Now with these returning foes, it's important to note that not every fight from the original has been brought back here. The Krauser boss fight has been binned. I know some fans are upset that it's gone, but be real, it added nothing to the original Separate Ways. It was a lazy redo and took away from Leon overcoming him. I was glad this was cut out, as to me, it felt redundant. And as we get numerous encounters with Pasanta before its evolution into U3, I felt this cut is one which doesn't hurt the game in any conceivable way. We get higher quality bosses with more depth and more gameplay variety. Wins all round as far as I'm concerned. Now that spoilers are over, let's bring this back to Ada's character and how it's presented in the gameplay. As mentioned earlier, the grapple gun is a key part of what makes Ada, Ada. But at the base level, Ada is a spy, and they realise this throughout the game in varying ways. First up, let's talk stealth. Ada gets a bunch of opportunities to use it to her advantage, sneaking through whole areas, taking out every enemy with a knife. And with how limited resources are, you want to utilise this wherever you can. Espionage is really brought to the forefront with the iris system, a contact lens which gives Ada real-time data on her surroundings. It helps her read fingerprints to solve keypad puzzles, highlight where you can use the grapple hook in the environment, and even track footprints. Its inclusion isn't deep, but it's a nice nod to the character. Speaking of puzzles, they are here, but they are nowhere near as complex as the base game. The answers are either given to you thanks to Iris, or solvable while reading a file which you pick up in the same room. It helps keep the pace lightning fast, but personally, I could have done with some more challenge in this area, even if I appreciate the difference in how they are presented thanks to Iris. Now in wrapping up this section, RE4 Remake's base gameplay returns in all its glory, and is expanded with additional options in the grapple gun and Iris which exemplify Ada's character, changing the gameplay up just enough to stop it feeling like a retread. The bosses that returned are re-envisioned, testing the player with interesting mechanics and expanded movesets to keep the player on their toes. On a gameplay level, Separate Ways excels, taking what was already excellent in RE4 Remake and bringing enough to separate it into its own experience. When RE4 Remake came out 6 months ago, it was a bit of a mixed bag on the graphical front. Characters and environments are great. I mean, just look at Ada.
Hot diggity dog! This place is magnificent!
Now RE4 Remake isn't the best on the market when it comes to graphical fidelity, but it's still a good looking title. Where it was truly let down though, was with the ray tracing implementation. It was poorly realized, and as someone who revels in the graphical fidelity ray tracing adds to a game's atmosphere, I'll gladly sacrifice frames per second for stunning graphics. Separate Ways doesn't improve anything from the base game in this regard, and due to the poor implementation that adds nothing noticeable for 99% of the game, I decided once again to play through on my PS5 in performance mode. Now this gave me a 60 FPS experience at 4K. Now in terms of that performance, just like the base game, it ran perfectly like this. The action was smooth without any frame drops or screen tearing, which can kill immersion. Now it's a shame the RE engine hasn't been boosted to truly take advantage of next gen, but it is DLC after all. I shouldn't expect to see huge improvements on this front. All the standard features of the PS5 version return, with incredible use of haptics, adaptive triggers, and lightning fast load times. If you played RE4 Remake, which I imagine you have for checking this review out, it's identical on the performance front to my eye, for better or worse. Now speaking of performances, the casting. Oh boy. Mocap and animation wise, it's flawless. I adored the physicality each actor brought to their role, and the majority of performances are just as incredible as they were in the base game. Now I've already shone praise on Craig Bertanowski stepping into the boots of Albert Wesker, and somehow delivering a performance which feels perfectly natural for the character. And Andre Pina continues to kill it when it comes to Louis Sierra. But where I still have an issue is Ada. Now I know the actress Lily Gao has had a lot of shit from the vocal minority of the fan base, and that's not on. There's no need for anybody to threaten or overstep the boundary when it comes to critique, but for me, it just doesn't work. Physically, it's great, but her voice acting is just bad. It's so apathetic. There's no emotion, no sexy undertones, she just sounds bored throughout the entire thing. 6 hours with the character, I've gotten used to it I guess, but that's hardly praise. I've just come to accept that it just doesn't vibe with me at all. Now that's enough negativity, let's get into the positives. Score-wise, the game is exceptional. Infiltration's remix. One More Kiss coming back from RE2 original. A new version of Serenity that's way more faithful.
Woo! Yeah, baby!
Seriously, the music across this game is so goddamn good. Now I've tried to incorporate as much as I can into this review, but I barely scratched the surface. When Capcom uploads this soundtrack to Spotify, I'd encourage you to give it a play for yourself. It smacks that nostalgia gland in just the right way.
And I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
When RE4 Remake launched, the general consensus was overwhelmingly positive. However, there were vocal complaints on some fan favourite areas that were cut from Leon's mission. Now I'm glad to say that the majority of these overlooked areas have been incorporated into Separate Ways. Lasers, crushing pillars and the gondola all return, and they feel completely natural being here. Not every location returns. We don't get the lava room full of those dragons on chains, but let's be honest here, not everything would thematically fit with the game. And I walk away extremely impressed with what they've managed to include for the fans without harming the pacing, which the game nails so well. I swear that in development of Separate Ways, Capcom must have looked at the various critiques made, how much outcry there was for certain areas and bosses to return, and they went out of their way to include as much as they possibly could to complete the RE4 experience. And they truly delivered. Resident Evil 4 Separate Ways was always a decent mode, which was worth a playthrough to learn what Ada got up to during RE4, but it wasn't revolutionary. The remake manages to raise the bar in every conceivable way. It puts a focus on Ada's morality, showing a side to the character we've never seen before. It gives us Ada's iconic grapple gun spicing up the gameplay. It brings back fan favourite locations and set pieces, elevating the bosses to record heights, and it sets up RE5 with the reintroduction of Albert Wesker. All of this while telling a compelling story. Seriously, I am over the moon with this DLC, and to think Capcom only charged £7.99 is ridiculous. They could have easily charged double or triple the asking price, and I would have been happy to pay. Comparing the quality, love and care shown throughout Separate Ways to Capcom's previous effort with Shadows of Rose shows just how much they've raised the bar in this release, and I hope this has set the stage for what we can come to expect for the future of the franchise. Now, if for some reason you're on the fence about Separate Ways, do yourself a favour, go out and play it. You won't regret it. And that's it for this review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then put a like on the video and consider subscribing for more Resident Evil content. Have you played Separate Ways? What did you think of it? Let me know in the comment section. I try to respond to everyone, so I'll look forward to discussing it with you. Up next on the channel, I'll have a review of RE5's DLC, Lost in Nightmares and Desperate Escape, while still bringing you the Resident Evil movie review discussions every couple of weeks. God damn how good to you guys. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. See ya.